Well, thank you all. I'm Jeff Davis. I'm a longshoreman by trade. Didn't intend to do that, but here I am. That's how I put food on my table. Come from a long family of real estate investors, I guess, and so I kind of fell into that trade as well. So I own some commercial and residential property down in Southwest Washington. Currently, I'm a port commissioner at the Port of Olympia. As far as other committees that I sit on, I'm a trustee at the Thurston County Chamber. I also sit on the Economic Development Council for Thurston County as a director. Was on a school board member for 3 years, and on top of that, was a board member for a credit union for about 8 years, of which we were small at one time, and now it's rather large. So my experience in the business end of things is fairly strong. I bring that to this campaign as well as being a blue-collar worker. So I think that in some aspects that's what makes me a little bit unique, I guess, as far as understanding the business end of things while also understanding the perspective of the working men and women out there that make this country go. As far as what this campaign is about, we've heard each other's sayings already, but this campaign is about jobs in many ways and the economy. And what are we doing to get back to that? The unemployment rate for Kitsap County last time I checked was 7.6. For Mason it's 10.6, and for Thurston it's 7.7. So there's a diversity of cultures here as it pertains to the 35th, but at the end of the day we have to look at ways in which we're going to bring jobs in the area. Kidda up here, and I'll speak on, since we're in Kitsap County, I'll speak on some of the things that they're doing up here. I think that they're doing a fantastic job in isolating or at least identifying specific sectors in which they can develop. In Mason County there's certain sectors regarding natural resources that they can do. In Thurston we have some it's kind of a hodgepodge of things, but understanding how to bring job development, job creation to the area in the 35th district and even the state is something that I'm very passionate about. Using our natural resources as an economic driver to make that happen is, I think, a strong way of doing that. And on top of that, getting back to the notion of education, career and technical education is going to be a pathway to bring jobs to the area. So I'd like to speak on all those issues a little bit later.
Great. Drew.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. My name is Drew McEwen, and I appreciate the time and for everybody being here today. I moved out here originally in 1994. I was born and raised in the Midwest, and the Navy brought me out here, and my first experience in Kitsap County was coming off the ferry and driving up to Bangor, and did my submarine duty out of there for the ensuing years. And when I got out of the Navy, I was recruited by my uncle and went into the business world, worked for his investment firm, and figured I knew enough and that I had everything down. So in August of 2001, I resigned, start my own firm, and we know what happened with 9/11, and that was a big gut check. So the best business plan out the window, and but survived by taking a factory job and working at 10 at night to 6 in the morning. And when I was done with that, I'd ride my bike down to my office, sleep on the floor for a few hours, and then hit the phone. And doing that for 6 months is what kept my company going, and I'm proud that almost 11 years later, still in business and doing well. And learned some very valuable lessons in that. I certainly would not want to go through it again, but I'm thankful for the experience that it gave me. And came back, returned to the district here in 2005. Just missed it. I enjoyed my time that I was out here in the Navy, and it was just at a point where I could pick up and move back here. So did that, and haven't looked back since. And I enjoy this community a great deal. Serve on the board at Alderbrook Golf and the Shelton Rotary Board that Linda's also a member of, and the president of the Shelton Chamber. And those have given me some keen insights into our community and the needs. The issues before us are certainly is the jobs and the economy. And we're going to fix that by easing the regulatory burden that are on businesses today and giving businesses the opportunity to grow and relieve the tax pressure that's there. Last year there was over 400 new regulatory environments put on us. And so in education and reforming state government, the other top two. So look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Linda.
Okay, I'm Linda Ring Erickson, and I'm also a candidate for the vacant position here in the 35th district. I grew up in the 35th district, and my parents grew up in the 35th district. But I had to leave the 35th district to get a job. My father died when I was finishing high school, and there wasn't a four-year college here, and there weren't a lot of jobs here, and I went through a very difficult time as a young person, doing some of the couch surfing and things that we hope our children won't have to go through. stayed in college as much because it gave me a place to live because I got scholarships as anything else. But ended up working outside this area for a long time and returning as soon as I could. But in the interim, my daughter didn't get to grow up here. And I hope that we can allow our children to make different choices. I know that some children will always leave, but we want our people to be able to get good jobs here, and we want them to be able to get good educations and make the decision to stay here if they want to, because I guess deep in my heart that's exactly what I wanted. I believe that this campaign is about jobs. People have heard me say it's about jobs, jobs, and jobs, and it's about the jobs we have and keeping them. It is about getting new jobs to come in here that are businesses that are committed to our area and want to pay good wages, or allowing jobs that are created here to prosper. And it's also about understanding the job market of the future and how we develop technical 2-year and 4-year programs that can be offered here and make excellence in the public schools a priority, so that it doesn't matter so much about our infrastructure, that world-class jobs will say we want to locate in the 35th district in Washington State because they have the people that we want to employ. Mason County does have more of a historic resource base, and of course we have a lot of things to look at in terms of how we fund our transportation.
Well, let's have the first question about jobs, since y'all talked about that, and I guess I'm particularly interested on how you balance job creation with environment, because that's so important, especially, Mason County, Hood Canal, some of the natural resources you have in your district. And so I'm kind of interested in your perspective on how, give us an idea for job creation, what makes sense in your district, but also how you balance that with protecting some of those real important things to the constituents down there. I think I'll let Drew go first, and we'll go this way.
Okay, and how much time are we doing on questions? Just
well, whatever it takes you to answer, but try to.
Okay, all right.
So we all get to
Sure. First of all, I think everybody's for the environment. How can you be against it? We're part of it, and we do need to have job growth. And again, I go back to the regulatory environment that we're in, and over 400 new regulations went on the books last year. And it is hard for businesses to plan in a constantly changing environment, whether that's taxes or regulations that are changing. And if we look in the 35th district and companies that are involved with the environment, companies like Green Diamond in Mason County, great steward of the environment. And we have solid companies that the environment is their livelihood. And we need to recognize that those are the experts. And do we need regulations? Certainly. But we need to make sure they make sense and that businesses can plan for them. And I believe that is the key to it. I think we're overregulated between growth management, shoreline, Department of Ecology. There's so much out there right now, and there's a lack of local control with it. And I spoke to growth management, local control, local review boards, I think would go a long ways in helping to streamline some of the regulatory burden that is there for businesses, and having people that understand the community they are in, not people that are on the other side of the water. So there's a balance there, and I believe we have responsible companies in our district. And again, just recognizing that they're the experts, and we can work together and have leadership, and we can accomplish both of those.
I think one of the advantages we have in the 35th district here is we haven't already screwed it up so badly it can't be fixed. We have some of the most fragile and lovely natural resources in the world here, and an opportunity to kind of look at other parts of the country and say, well, that didn't work very well, what can we do differently? Many of the natural resources based businesses in the 35th district, the shellfish industry and our timber industry, have actually been leaders in the world in terms of looking at how to develop their business at the same time as they look towards preserving the resources. An example with that would be that, of course, Simpson had the first approved habitat conservation plan in the nation. A lot of the work that's been done with regard to road development in private forests and how to keep that from hurting the drainage into the fragile wetlands and Puget Sound has been done based on work done here in Mason County. We have a lot of opportunities, I think, in the Kitsap County area particularly, to work real hard to make sure that the ferry system works right so it can become a viable part of the commuter system that brings goods and services in as well as commuters and takes finished products out. We have affordable land, we have good infrastructure in much of our area. I think there are things that we can do to selectively work with our economic development councils and attract the businesses of the future. I also think that we can make a civic investment in education that attracts businesses. People have heard me talk about businesses that come and look around, and if the principal's a husband, the wife will say, I won't live here, and they go away and they never come back. But if the principal is a woman, the husbands don't really care that much, but they still say, but we want our employees to be able to live near the schools that their children will go to. And so the schools have to be really good. And that's the conversation that I think we start to attract the kinds of businesses. And frankly, good long-term businesses are going to want to invest in the area. You don't want to invest in property that's going to be trashed. You don't want your employees to live on a beautiful waterfront that then turns out to be polluted and worthless. So I think we're looking for partnerships with new business, and I think we can do it.
David, your question was balance jobs and the environment. I want to highlight something that we're doing down in Thurston County through the Port of Olympia and the Economic Development Council. We've got a program that's called GRIP. That's the acronym. It stands for Green Regional Industrial Park. And what the concept is we would like to bring light manufacturing, light industrial complexes into some property that we have at the Port District down there, with the whole notion that's going to have low impact on the environment. There's going to be no issues regarding environmental concerns, and moreover, it's going to have an impact on the overall good of the community. Meaning, we'd like to embrace solar energy as number one. We'd like to embrace products that are going to be out there that are carbon neutral, number two. And I think that we have some inroads as far as the concept and throwing that out there on the table to say this is what we would like to embrace down in Thurston County. Now I'll go back to Kitsap County. KIDA up here has embraced the whole notion of the aerospace industry. Again, we're talking about light manufacturing, maybe some heavy manufacturing, but the days of smokestacks are gone. And everybody in the environment here on the peninsula, and moreover for the state of Washington, aren't going to accept that anymore. So we have to be more creative as far as trying to figure out how can we bring light manufacturing, light industry back into an area that's got low impact on the community, and still maintain a sense of good paying jobs. I think it's available out there. It's just going to take a strategic plan developed by each individual county through the EDCs, through the chambers, through the community colleges to say this is what we're going to embrace. The elements are in place already. So let's make sure that they stay there and try to focus on that as much as we can. I can't go without saying, though, that all of this will be lost if we don't address the issue of community and technical education. So many times we've had people come into Thurston County or businesses come into Thurston County. At the end of the day, they say, we like what we see, we like what you have to offer. There's just not the skill set of the type of individuals that we have, or that you have here, to do the type of work that we're looking for. So we have to start propping up our, used to be called vocational, but now it's community and technical programs to make sure that we're gearing towards the future on that.
Well, as a legislature, or legislator, what do you think is the role of the legislature? SPI is the one that's directly involved in education. So what does, in your opinions, what does the legislature really do? What would you like to see them do?
We can start at the end. I can start if you like, but in fairness.
Where do you want to start? I can.
Well, I'll start by where you see what is the legislature's role in education.
Clearly, we are all, I think we all should be acutely aware of the McClary decision, which is very clear that the state will provide, ample and stable funding for education. I think that's very, very important. Beyond just basically saying, provide the money, there's a clear opportunity for leadership to provide all-day kindergarten. We know that that gives our children an opportunity to excel. Are there other earlier childhood avenues that we need to look at? I think that would probably be an area that I would hope we would take some time and really discuss it. Also, really a fundamental need to invest in technical and four-year education, and again, that is primarily a financial thing. Certainly, the legislators are not the purveyors of what classroom teachers are doing in the classroom. That falls in another area, but they can certainly and should certainly give policy direction and enough funding to ensure that the right programs can be funded. A real commitment at the legislature to higher education, technical and four-year institutions is, I think, very critical.
Peter, I just want to make sure I understood the question. Did I hear you say that you want to know what the role of the legislature is for education in general?
Well, reading through the websites, and I'll clarify a position, I see we're talking, there's a bunch of stuff that you talk about in education, improving standards and all that kind of stuff. So I'm asking, we know that funding is a responsibility of the legislature, but above that, what do you think the legislature's role is in education? That's what I'm asking.
Well, funding, and I got to go back to it. The funding is, and it's already been touched upon as far as in the Clary case, and I mean, you all know that this isn't the first time that the state's been held to task on this, that they're not fully living up to their obligation. I was disappointed that they didn't address it in the 2012 session as far as fully funding it, but evidently we've got till 2016 to figure that out. It needs to happen now. We need to start finding those funding mechanisms to make that happen. As far as what I was talking about in career and technical education, I think it's incumbent upon us to put direction out there to say, these are going to be tools by which we can succeed as a state and even as a region. These are the things that we need that are necessary out there as far as the type of skill set of the individuals that we're going to need to bring the light manufacturing in. So in Mason County, it's quite a bit different dichotomy in the high school than it is in Thurston or even Kitsap, and that there's programs that are called choice. There's programs there in high school where they actually talk about vocational programs. In my mind, those got to be brought back to the forefront, and that has to be highlighted in the program that is brought forth by the legislature to say that this is going to be a priority in how we educate. We've got standards out there regarding graduation level, or graduation criteria by which that happens. But I think it's incumbent upon us to say, you know, look, we're the leaders here. We need to be pushing us in a direction we need to be going that we think is going to be beneficial for the economy. Funding, yes, that's number one. But number two, those standards need to be brought forth by the things that we're seeing out there in the field and the information we're receiving from the not only the teachers and the administrators, but moreover from the taxpayers and the parents that are actually have students in class.
Okay. When it comes to the role of the legislature in education, funding, and 59 cents out of every dollar, according to the Washington Policy Institute, 59 cents out of every dollar actually makes it to the classroom. And I believe that's illustrative of the issue that we have in education. We can properly fund it by increasing that figure. And speaking with some of the superintendents of the school districts in this district, right now, at the end of the day, on average, 80% of their budget is dictated by state mandates. We have the state too heavily involved in local decisions, and that needs to be removed so that a school district can make a choice for itself on how it wants to handle its the funds that it's given by the state. And we start to change that process and give back the local control that is so inherent. Do we have to have standards as a state? Yes, we do. And I think we need to be very careful on how we define those standards. Do we define standards as is imposed by some federal and state legislation right now that pretty much measures based on passing the children? I don't think that's accurate. I would much rather see a child held back and make sure that they know what they need to know before moving on. I think having a measurement that is strictly based on children passing does not give us a quality education. Our children deserve to come out of high school, and if they choose to go in the military, right to the job market, a tech school or college, whatever it is, they deserve, and we are obligated to make sure that they have the tools they need to get out and be ready to go. And when they have to take remedial math and English at the college level to get up to speed, I think we've fallen short in our duty. And so I would like to see the mandates by the state reduced. We can have some clear standards that need to be met, and we can increase that funding figure that goes to the classroom by removing some of the bureaucratic levels between the state and the local school districts. And I'm an advocate for local control right down to the building. I think a principal should have control over his building's budget, his or her building budget, and be held accountable for the standards that are being met or not met in that particular building.
I'm going to follow up on that
Sure.
with a question that it kind of connects what a few of you were saying. It has to do with funding. Drew, you're saying local control is a better way to do things, and North Mason District in your district just passed or has had to pass levies, and so
right.
That's a way that it's local control in the sense that local voters are deciding here's how much money we feel we can contribute. Jeff, you're saying number one, funding's got to be number one in the whole thing. There was last year an initiative for an income tax. I think that was going to be dedicated to education. So the question is, would you be in favor? If an income tax is dedicated to education, is that something you're in favor of? Should it be incumbent on the local property tax levies that come from districts and only local voters doing that? Or is there another way to better fund education?
It's a tough question, David, and it really is. I mean, currently we got levy equalization, which works. And again, I heard two different questions here. And I think we all know that what happened, King County education is different than Mason County education, and the funding mechanisms are completely different as well. Mercer Island has a much better funding mechanism for their school district than we do here in the 35th district. So there's two different proposals out there that I've heard, at least, as far as how do we bring that happen. Do we still maintain that levy equalization notion out there? Do we fully fund education 100%? Those are questions that are going to be asked down the road. So your question regarding sales tax, all options need to be on the table right now as far as looking at that. Am I in favor of a sales tax?
You mean income tax?
Thank you for my correction. Nope. Yeah, an income tax. I think if you look at the raw numbers and the raw data of states that have income tax as opposed to a sales tax, the peaks and the valleys aren't as high and low as if you do have an income tax that's out there. Do I think that that's going to be the end all? Perhaps a blend of the two is going to would be a better option. Am I going to equivocally say that I'm in favor of an income tax? I think it's something that needs to be explored. To say this as opposed to that or opposed to this, I mean, it becomes too convoluted and too confining. So I'll go back and say all options need to be put on the table to address it. We all know that the restrictions of 1053 is going to make any sort of income tax or any sort of new income streams being brought in incredibly hard to do. But again, the obligation of funding schools, everything has to be on the table to look at this right now, and I'm willing to look at all options.
Any other ideas? Maybe something
I wish I did. I really do.
To answer your question, I am without a doubt opposed to an income tax in the state, and the voters in this district spoke pretty loudly to that issue. And I do not intend to do anything to usurp their will, nor do I support an income tax. So to me, that is off the table. We go down a road then that to a higher taxation state, and I don't believe that that's what we want. We can solve the bulk of these funding issues, again, looking at the bureaucracies that are in place and the unfunded mandates, but more importantly, it goes back to the jobs and the economy. And if we get our economy moving and we create jobs, we get out of the way of business and allow them to grow and to hire more people, that increases revenue. And that is the solution to our issues. It's not imposing more taxes and fees on the citizens of Washington. They pay enough. The state legislature needs to start showing leadership and come together and stop the partisan bickering. And let's find where we agree and let's get those things done and move forward. So I am not opposed to, or I am opposed to an income tax, to answer your question.
Okay. And I guess I would start by kind of saying that I think I disagree with Jeff with regard to that there's different mechanisms for funding education in King County or Mercer Island than there are in the 35th district. I think the problem is that we've all got the same set of options, and when you have a lot of assessed valuation, it yields a very different result than it does when you have an area with not as much assessed valuation. And the ability to actually equalize across the state has never been a perfect model, and I think we continue to struggle for a way to make that equitable. When I was lucky enough to go to school in the 35th district, when our schools were the best schools in the state, and we had the best schools in the nation. But over time, the funding, if you want to call it the old stump tax, went away, and we've had equalization. So we've tried different models, and the one we have right now disenfranchises the students in districts with a lower assessed valuation, or a district where you have a lot of long-term timberland that doesn't get that particular assessment. So the issue is, how do we at the legislature, address the fact that we need to have good education at all of our schools. And that gets back to my last answer, which is I think we need to really look at funding. Would I consider an income tax? I'd have to look at the specific bill, but I would consider any alternative tax that allowed a dedicated source of funding to education. One of the problems for education is when you have to get in and, you know, it's kind of this consistent fight for the resources, and sometimes education comes out on the wrong end of that. The courts have been clear several times with us that we can't keep doing that, that the priority of the state is education. So I'd like to consider whatever variety of mechanisms. I'd be looking for a stable, growing fund. You asked if I had anything in mind. I think a consideration maybe of a statewide utility tax. One of the things we saw during the last downturn is cities did a little bit better because they had utility taxes which stayed stable, property taxes which stayed stable, and they lost in the sales tax. With counties got into some real difficult times because we were kind of like the two-legged stool. We had our property tax which stayed stable, but when the sales tax fell 26%, we were in real trouble. And for those who don't know, I'm in my second term as a county commissioner in Mason County. I've been doing this for about 7.5 years now. So when you look at a tax revenue stream, you need to look at it and how over time will it be able to support the services that you're going to dedicate it to. So it's not so much about would I consider an income tax, is how would we propose restructuring our revenue stream so that we had a dedicated growing revenue stream for education, for ample funding of education.
This changes the subject just a bit, but you mentioned something that I've kind of had in my mind. This is a district with a lot of rural areas, relative to what we are here in Kitsap, which are probably the most rural areas. Give me one example of a way that the 35th district is different because of that character, and what would you kind of put at the top of that priority? Something that is different that you're going to have a focus on that maybe the others around this delegation wouldn't be paying attention to, and something that you're going to have to take up the lead on. We'll start with Linda.
Well, I think it's transportation. If you go into one of the State Department of Transportation meetings and they talk about freight mobility corridors, and you look at pretty much the 35th district and we don't have any, that suggests to you that part of the reason that we have struggled in an economic way is that we really haven't had the infrastructure investments that the rest of the state has had over the past 50 or even 100 years. We have a number of choke points here in Kitsap County, one that I get to enjoy frequently there by the wastewater treatment plant when I'm trying to get back on Highway 3 going south. Of course, we would like to see a lot of development going in around the Bremerton Airport, and there's some infrastructure choke points there. The Belfair bypass remains a problem. I can go farther south and talk to you about the dangers and the freight mobility problems that we have at the Johns Prairie Road Highway 3 intersection. And if any of you, nobody goes through our part of the district to get from here to Olympia because nobody wants to be stopped in Belfair and stopped again trying to get through Shelton. So I think as a rural community, if we're going to have and attract the kind of jobs we want, we need to have a dependable, reasonable amount of infrastructure investment into our area. And I think that that is a different conversation for the 35th district than it might be for the 46th district, which is a much more urban area. I also think that we have some issues around, I would call it wellness and community health. People in the rural areas seem to struggle a little bit more to get their health care delivery. We have a very good hospital and a very good Kerrison clinic now in Mason County, but it still may mean that you are many, many miles away from health care. And for a family of limited resources, that continues to be a struggle. The health departments and the community health care system in Bremerton and in Olympia is, of course, much more sophisticated, and there's far more services available than there are in the rural part of Mason County. So I think that's another, again, state level conversation. Another issue is water quality. provision of utility kinds of services. You know, how do you afford to develop a sewer system in an area that needs to be developed to protect Puget Sound, but the reality is that kind of infrastructure is very expensive, or how do you get people onto Group A water systems that need to be there?
Costing some money in welfare.
Yeah, David, Linda stole my thunder as far as what I was going to say regarding transportation. I was a legislative director for the International Longshore Warehouse Union for about 9 years, which meant my job primarily was working on legislative issues, not just in this state, but nationally as far as freight mobility. How do we get goods from one area to export or import to where it needs to be going? So I highlighted a lot of transportation programs in the state, and even worked on nationwide issues regarding our rail system, our highway system, our infrastructure system. So I'm going to walk away from that just for a second. Not too many people are aware that this district is one of the most rural districts in all 49, 49. You think about districts over on the east side of the mountains, you'd think that's very rural, but we only have one incorporated city in all of the 35th, and that's Shelton. We have parts of Bremerton, of course, but there's one incorporated city. Belfair, for all practical purposes, is a large area. It's not incorporated. So I find that fascinating. The number one issue in my mind regarding issues that are going to affect the district itself is transportation. There are some strategic problems that need to be addressed there, and it's not just going to be helping Mason County and Kitsap County, but Clay Ellen and Jefferson as well. How do you do that with respect to the individuals that live here, that live in the rural part of this state, because they actually like living there? It's going to be a tough balancing act. But I think at the end of the day, and the people that I talk to on the doors, bringing jobs in the area is an important element to what they feel government should be doing right now. I would advocate that one of the biggest things that needs to be addressed in this very rural district is how do we prop that up? Transportation is an issue, and I would also add it's not just with our highways and the rail. We've got one of the biggest movers of people that just come in just south of us here as far as the ferry system. How do we make sure that stays in place? I've been working on ferry issues as far as that's concerned for quite some time, and I want to make sure that it stays there as well. And just to highlight that, whether we take that out of the Department of Transportation, have its own separate funding mechanism, I think that that's something that needs to be explored. But we all know that Kitsap County and much of Mason County as well relies on transportation from the ferry system to get over to King or Pierce County to go to work. So the rural problems in this area, in my mind, have to do with transportation. And I think people keep talking about the money's there. The money's always put into the budget. Anybody that goes to the store right now and purchases something at the grocery store, we're paying for a tunnel that's built over in King County right now. I have made statements many different times that money would be better suited to come over here to the peninsula. The return on the investment would be much better. The economic development that would be generated from improving Highway 101 or improving Highway 3 would be much more beneficial for the citizens of the state than having a big hole built over in King County. So it's going to take somebody that's going to go to Olympia, that's able to stand up and say, listen, we need to start thinking about the return on the investment to the citizens of the taxpayers of the area. It's not just King County. There's a lot going on over here in the peninsula that can be addressed, and I think that some of that can be drawn from the 35th District.
So to dovetail from that, and I'm going to come back with the transportation because that is a key part of it, and in the job market and transportation, a vital infrastructure is important to job creation, to freight mobility, and that drives the local economy. And specifically in Mason County, over 50% of the workforce, or right around 50% of the workforce, leaves the county every day to go to work. And so those are dollars, because you spend money typically where you're spending your day at, and we're losing dollars outside of the county there in Mason County. Kitsap, that figure isn't quite as high, but you do have migration certainly to Seattle every day. And Thurston County is probably in a little bit better of a situation there with the state capital. But so doing a better job with our infrastructure is going to help this district a lot. And well, let's look at what the root cause is. I believe it was in 2008, the state legislature changed the priorities for the Department of Transportation. Congestion relief and freight mobility are not one of the 5 stated priorities of the Department of Transportation. So why do we have this problem? We have not made it a priority for them, and subsequently they're not acting on it. And What are they acting on? Things like Sound Transit that moves less than 6% of the people, but yet is projected to receive over half of the DOT budget. Our focus is in the wrong place. It's no wonder we don't have a Belfair bypass. It's no wonder we have issues in the ferry system right now. And with the widening of the Panama Canal in 2014, obviously we have longshoremen in the district that work in our various ports. The widening of the Panama Canal in 2014, we're going to lose that much more freight from the West Coast because those ships will be able to go through the canal and goes directly to the East Coast. We are at a disadvantage. We're in Seattle. They're spending money to reduce the number of lanes with the tunnel. That's not the answer to the issues before us right now. Meanwhile, Vancouver to the north has significantly increased its infrastructure in rail and highways. What traffic will be left to the West Coast is probably going to go there. So we have big issues before us, and again, it's reprioritizing the DOT. Freight mobility and congestion relief need to be their priorities, and not some of these other things that they're doing. And that'll help drive the job market. The industrial parks we have in the 3 counties will have better access to the highways and the freight lines, and we can get the job market moving.
The establishment of a coal port on the coast of Washington, whether in Bellingham or Grays Harbor, is probably going to be something the legislature is going to be thinking about during the next session. What are your views on the environmental costs of that versus the potential for job creation?
Who's first? All right. There's 2 things there. Knowing about freight mobility, I can tell you that there is no transportation infrastructure put in place to accommodate the type of export of coal that they're looking to do right now, with the exception of Bellingham. I'm going to come back to Bellingham for a second. So the 2 major ports, perhaps 3 major ports that could accommodate it right now is Aberdeen, Longview, maybe Vancouver. Those are the 3 that have been highlighted in the state of Washington. The type of cars that are looking to run through there would just be an incredible boondoggle for all of those areas. So money would have to come from either the state or private investment to make that happen. I can tell you private investment is not going to probably do that. They haven't in the past, and I don't know why they would start now. So historically they go to the Fed, they come to the state, and they look for financing to make that happen. So in many ways you're right. The state is going to have a decision on that, on whether or not that coal facility is going to happen based on the infrastructure alone. And that's going to be a decision that all members of the legislature is going to have. As far as the standards on the environmental, we have standards that are currently in place. It's going to be up to the Department of Ecology, ORCA, as far as clean air standards, to make sure that if they're found in compliance, that's respected. If it's not, then it goes away. Now, I say that because there's a lot of questions on whether or not we're going to be enhancing that or looking at this on a global scale, and I would caution that. Is it the Department of Ecology's role to start looking at global influences? And I'm not so sure that that's a path that we want to go down, meaning, do we need to start looking at what China does as far as their burning of the coal and how that impacts us here? I think that opens up a whole Pandora's box on whether or not that's out of the purview of what the Department of Ecology, their role is or not. Now I'm going to come back to Bellingham. Bellingham is, their citizens have told them, and there's still a big row about whether or not that's going to happen up there. At the end of the day, it's incumbent upon government, it's incumbent upon elected officials to listen to their citizenry and respect what it is that they want. I respect the decision that comes out of Bremerton. Bellingham. I respect the decision, if elected, what individuals are telling me about this, because the controlling factor that the legislature has on whether or not cargo is going to go through this state regarding coal is going to be how much dollars is going to go into that infrastructure itself. So I look forward to hearing those discussions. Would it be job creation? Yeah, it would. There would be, and I'm not talking hundreds of thousands of jobs, but there would be job creation as well, yes.
Okay, so this kind of goes back to the first question we had today in the balancing the environment and job growth, and that certainly needs to be looked at, and I believe that we can accomplish that. Again, there are responsible companies out there, and we have those discussions, and I believe that is a possibility to make that happen. Whether or not this becomes reality, and the cost that it would take to accomplish this, it comes back to me, business 101. You do that cost benefits analysis, and if it makes sense, if what we're going to benefit from it in terms of jobs and and growth in our local markets, then it's something we should do. But if our time frame, and again balancing the environment with that, but if the time frame to recapture that is way out there, we all know that the economy of today is not the same of what it was even 10 years ago. So we can't just rush into something, but yet on the same token, we need to make sure we do the proper study so that we don't miss an opportunity to create jobs for our state.
Okay, as currently proposed, I am not in favor of the coal trains. I don't think you can be elected to the legislature and just say, well, we'll just wait and see how everybody else does their job. I've attended actually with some people from Mason County, some Chamber of Commerce meetings in the greater Seattle area. There's a huge concern that the grade crossing issues for other businesses in the what I would call it, the urban Puget Sound core are going to be threatened by the coal trains. I do not think it will be ORCA that would make the decisions about the air pollution control, because ORCA is just really our regional body for Southwest Washington, minus Clark County in the far Southwest Washington. But I do think that there are issues with regard to national energy policy that will affect our air quality here, because if you burn the coal in this country, it would be carefully screened and monitored. If you take it to China and burn it, there's not going to be any of those standards in place, and we're already testing for pollutants up in Clallam County coming across on the airstreams from China. So it does raise some concerns for me. And I think that I'm ready and willing to make the decision as a legislature and not just kind of push the cart down the road and say, well, we'll have ecology do this and we'll have somebody else do that. I think we need to look at it thoughtfully and understand what the impacts, the broad impacts of the coal train might be.
This one, it may be as simple as a yes or no, but the gentleman who was in the 35th district is outgoing Finn, as well as the other 35th district representative. Last year they co-sponsored a bill along with a bunch of Republicans and Democrats to, if there was an initiative that was judged to cost the state more than $5 million, it would also have to identify a funding source. Didn't make it through, didn't even get a vote. I'm curious, is that something that you would be willing to kind of follow up on that same type of bill? And if yes, does it need to be tweaked? Does it need to be different to get it through?
Sure. Obviously, the details will speak to a lot of those. So, in general, yes, I support that. You know, I think there's a lot of problems that California has and with their propositions, and that's gotten them into a bind. They've had a lot of mandates, and they've capped a lot of things, and it puts their legislature in a pickle as to figuring out how to do it all. And so, yes, I think that's a reasonable and responsible solution, or part of the solution. But you know, we'll see what the details of a proposal would be. But in general, yes, I would support that.
And I've not read that particular bill, but I would support a proposal similar to that. I think that we need to be responsible and answer to the people that elect us, and we need to understand how we're going to pay for something before we implement it.
Yes, as well.
You mentioned about regulation and unfunded mandates and bureaucracies. Can you give us some examples of how you're going to attack that problem?
Sure. You know, the governor has has made an effort to reduce the ongoing agency passing of regulations, which are just below the equivalent of law. But I think we need to have a process that before regulation takes effect, that it goes before the governor within a specified time period and is treated similar to a bill, and it's either yay or nay. And I think we need to have that check in place and properly exercised. So that would be one solution to it. Obviously there's going to be emergencies and different situations, but things should have a sunset provision. If it's really that great, then the legislature can enact it and make it permanent in law. But otherwise, I believe in a sunset provision for regulations. It makes you go back and review, does it make sense what was happened 20 years ago? Does that still make sense today? And I think that's a big part of the solution there.
The rest of you, have any?
Okay, could you repeat the question?
You mentioned that you felt the state was overburdened with regulations and bureaucracies and mandates. I was curious what you all thought about that and any specific ideas on how to relieve that problem.
Okay, yeah, I do have some thoughts about that. Everybody is really sick to death of counties and cities saying, don't give us unfunded mandates. But I think that sometimes the legislative intent and the agency rulemaking kind of don't align. How you control that, I'm not sure I have the best answer in the world, but I do think it is an issue for perhaps better articulating legislative intent so that the boundaries set for agencies when they go into the rulemaking process are more specific and more clear. And that's something, you know, legislators can do. They can get that text and they can be willing to work on that, and they can go through with the people that will be doing the practice in advance to make sure that the legislative intent is clearly stated so that we don't end up with something on the books as legislators that was not the intent of the law we passed.
Well, Larry, I think I'd like to bring that all together, kind of give you an example, like the Growth Management Act. You know, this is a document that was created 20 years ago, and it's great intention. There's a lot of very good language in it, but we've evolved as a community and as a society, and this notion to develop in specific regions and protect certain lands worked 20 years ago. But it's still a very good document. I don't want to dismiss that, but it needs to be looked at again. There's other issues out there, and unfortunately none come to mind, but like that say, you know, this needs to be picked up and says, does this still applicable today? Does this still work? And I think that notion has to come into play somewhere along the line to say, you know, what issues out there were addressed 20 years ago, 50 years ago, that may not have the intention of which they have today. And I think that's something that needs to be addressed further down the road. We'll just add that to the list of everything else the government needs to do.
I expect that the voters are going to want to know what your positions are on the two major social issues that are going to be on the ballot in November, same-sex marriage and marijuana legalization.
Is it my turn?
Yeah.
Yeah, on, gosh, what is it, it's not 1023. Same
Referendum
section.
74.
1074, thank you. Marriage equalization, I'm in favor of it. I will be voting yes on that. As far as the marijuana initiative, that's a tough one as it stands right now. I am leaning yes right now is what I'd like to say as far as legalizing it. I think that there needs to be some strong provisions put on it to make sure that we can ensure that it doesn't get into the hands of those that don't do it. But at the end of the day, its intention as far as having medicinal qualities, I think are valid based on people that I know that say that it actually does help them. So if it's going to relieve them and we can tax it in a way that where there can be income brought to the state, I think that's something that we need to explore.
Gay marriage is deeply personal for everyone on both sides of the aisle, and as it is for me and everyone else that is out there. And you know, I think that the legislature tried to divert some focus away from the budget this past year. I don't think the time was appropriate considering the fiscal issues they had. But the people of this state are going to decide it in November. And however the people of this state decide on that initiative, I will do nothing to usurp the will of the people. How they vote is what I will support if in the legislature. When it comes to marijuana, you know, this transcends federal and state law, and until the federal government figures out what they're going to do, I think we set our people up for, you know, possibly for other consequences. So, you know, to me, it's not it's an issue that if it were to pass, I could live with it. But I think until the federal government figures out where they're at with it, I think we're running into some serious risk for our citizens by giving them the idea that it is fully legal when in reality it's not.
I support marriage equality, and as a retired police officer, I support some form of legalizing marijuana. I think we've spent vast amounts of resources in our state over the years that probably could have been used to address a whole lot of other things. By and large, I think our communities would rather see us solving burglaries and doing crime prevention. than having our rather expensive law enforcement people stand around in alleys waiting for something to happen. We have always had some regulation on alcohol, and I believe that there would be a set of requirements that would make sense for legalization of marijuana.
A couple of you talked briefly about ferry transportation. I'm curious if there's anything in particular that you plan on addressing or presenting to the legislature if you're elected.
Well, I grew up in a family that was from around here, and you know, I suppose they were a little bit peculiar. One of the first things I remember hearing as a child is how much my parents hated the old blackball ferries. So I'm a big believer in that the ferries are part of the state highway system. We need to not only make a good ferry system, we need to make them part of the highway system so that people understand that that is part of our transportation system. Until we get to affordable ferry and dependable and available ferry service across Puget Sound, we're never going to have the kind of economic development that we want in this area. So I think that kind of answers your question. I would, I guess, again, probably offer a little bit different opinion. I think that over the last many sessions, the urban core, the King County area, has been the contributor of revenue to our region. We get back about $1.50, I think, for every dollar we pay in taxes, and they get back about 50 cents. That's probably a couple of years out of date. They would like, and they should like, to have us develop a full, robust economy with a lot of jobs so that people are taking the ferry over here to work is the same way that right now they're waiting for the ferry to go back, to go to work. And so I think all of Washington wins by adequately funding a very dependable and state-of-the-art ferry service.
As I spoke to earlier, I'm in favor of the ferry system, and it is a part of the state highway system. I am not in favor of privatizing it. I don't know if that's the direction you're hoping to go. But I think that we can produce ferries that are environmentally safe, that can transport the type of people to and from where they need to be going in an effective manner, and it's something that needs to be out there on the forefront of a priority, not just for the state of Washington, but in the citizens of the 35th. But this is a jewel of the Northwest. You know, growing up and going to the San Juan Islands as a kid was a pleasure for me because we were on the ferry system. It's not, we have to look at it not just as a way of moving people to where it is they're living and working, but also be able to capitalize on the tourism aspects of that as well. I am a big fan of the ferries, you know, and again, it goes back to my childhood days, but bringing that to the forefront to make sure that it's fully funded. And I mentioned this earlier, if we have to go outside the Department of Transportation, make sure that that's funded. I think that that's a viable option that needs to be explored a little bit further.
Yep, I support the ferry system. You know, and I just as my, you know, from my own experience, I mean, living in the middle of the district, given the choice, if the scheduling works, I always opt to go this way, as opposed to driving it. So, and obviously it's a big tool for a lot of commuters going to Seattle from Kitsap County. And again, I'm going to go back to the Department of Transportation's priorities, and we need to shore that up. And again, when we're spending half our DOT budget on sound transit that moves less than 6% of the people, you know, I think the priority's out of whack. So, you know, by handling that and addressing that, we can properly address the ferry system and keep that within the Department of Transportation, and continue to make that a vital and even better resource for commuters and tourists.